Hello and welcome to Stellar Strategy Gaming. Today we will be discussing how to make Black Widow in D&D. This is actually something you guys requested. I threw up a poll on Reddit a few weeks ago, and overwhelmingly Black Widow won. After this, I'm sure I'll throw up another poll at some point and see what the next one of these you guys want is, because this is becoming quite the popular little series of ours. So we have two builds today, and we're going to start off with Ben's build for Black Widow.
Alright, so beginning with the basics, I started with the race. I chose Halfling. And the reason why I chose Halfling is for a couple of reasons. One, she's just smaller than everybody else. I think that's just something that wasn't necessarily planned, but if you watch the movie, one of the noticeable differences is that you always have Black Widow is like a foot shorter than all the other heroes, unless we're counting the Hulk or Thor, in which case it's 2 or 3 feet. So it works with that, but also she doesn't demonstrate a lot of truly magical or sci-fi abilities the way, again, Thor or Captain America do, but she does just things that should kill her don't, and she never truly seems to fail at anything. There are things that don't work, but she never just completely botches it the way most of the other heroes do, and that struck me as Halfling's luck all day. I'd probably go with the stout Halfling. Just makes sense with who she is as a person. Like, it's weird, Scarlett Johansson's an objectively beautiful human being, but if you said this is a person who had some ancestors who were dwarves and some ancestors who were halflings, I'd be like, yeah, I can sort of see this. For the background, I chose the Charlatan. She clearly has the ability to assume secret identities and blend in different societies, so that makes perfect sense. And for her class build, I went with a 5/5 Rogue and Fighter. Now, for the fighter archetype, I chose one that I've mostly ignored up until this point, to be honest, which is called Inquisitive. Wizards of the Coast, please bear in mind, Inquisitive is an adjective. It's not the name of a profession. Scout is a profession. Assassin is a profession. Thief is a profession. Inquisitive, a thief can be inquisitive, or... Okay, I'm done. When you choose this archetype at 3rd level, you develop a talent for picking out lies. Whenever you make a Wisdom Insight check to determine whether a creature is lying, treat a roll of 7 or lower on a d20 as an 8. That really struck me as something that would be right up her alley. Eye for detail. Bonus action, you make a Wisdom check to spot hidden creature or object. And Insightful Fighting, at 3rd level, you gain the ability to decipher an opponent's tactics and develop a counter to them as a bonus. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But if you succeed, you can use your sneaky attack against that target, even if you don't have advantage on the attack roll. So this just kind of strikes me with her way of fighting. And of course, but at 5th level with the Rogue, you get the Uncanny Dodge, which there again, she's fighting against literal gods and somehow surviving it. That Uncanny Dodge makes sense to me. Now for her fighter type, I went with one that is not usually my favorite, if I'm being completely honest, which is the Battlemaster. Now, Battlemasters get superiority die and maneuvers. I'm not going to go too deeply into the mechanics of it. It's all in the player's handbook, or you can look it up online. But basically, the Battlemaster gets the ability, when they succeed in an attack, to attempt to do something else. So, for example, there's Disarming Attack. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend 1 superiority die to attempt to disarm the target, forcing it to drop 1 item of your choice that it's holding. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll. Target must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, it drops the object you choose. The object lands at its feet. The other one that I liked a lot is the Trip Attack. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend 1 superiority die to attempt to knock the target down. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and if the target is large or smaller, it must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, you knock the target prone. We see her do that constantly. She's always taking on people who are bigger and stronger than she is in one way or another, just ditching them on the ground. It's sort of at least in the movies, it's sort of a staple of her fighting style. And as they pointed out in the Black Widow movie, when she lands after doing it, she goes into that weird sprawl position and does the hair flip, but I'm not aware of a D&D mechanic that supports that.
I think that's called the actor feat, actually.
Oh, there you go. Something I would like to point out about this is that apart from being, I think, a fairly true to the character build, it's also actually a pretty good combination because the Trip Attack Okay, so let me back up. 4th level fighter, you have extra attack. So with the first attack, if you land it, you hit the trip attack, knock the target prone. Target's prone, you get the second attack. Now you can use your sneak attack, even if you don't have, even if nothing else is giving you advantage. A prone target gives you disadvantage. And in addition, because it's a fighter, you can choose 2-weapon fighting. And we do see her doing that a lot. She'll be wielding 2 guns or 2 knives or 2 of something. So, you get 3 attacks total. You got a really good chance of getting that sneak attack damage in one way or another.
Yep, in the optimal universe, there would be a ban on multiclassing fighter and rogue because the sneak attack works so well with all of the fighter archetypes advantage stuff. I mean, so many variations which we will probably get into in a future video. But for now, very interesting build you have there. I don't really have any follow-up questions for the moment. That all seems pretty solid for stats, actually. In fact, I'm starting to notice a pattern here, which is that you tend to lean a little more into how to bring this character and make it compatible with the world, whereas I'm very much focused on how to transfer the spirit of the character a little more.
Yes. Now, the one thing that I was a little bit iffy about on this build is that it does not take advantage of the fighter's ability to use essentially any armor. And it was to the point that I was actually considering having her go monk, because just no armor at all. I feel like, though, that bodysuit she always seems to be wearing, I feel like that would count as light armor, and it just seemed to work out better. And I really wanted to capture the essence that we see in that character, particularly in the first Avengers movie, where she seems to just, like, she picks up an alien gun and she just knows how to use it. like that's just the level of training this person is. I'm not really aware of a class other than fighter that really encapsulates that so well. So now that my part of this is done, Mara, you're up. What did you get?
Well, I created a monk artificer multi-class. Similar 5/5 build, and the reason why I went with monk was because I'd say we see her do more unarmed combat on average than weapon combat, but that's also where the artificer comes in, is that the artificer gives her those proficiencies with weapons that you wouldn't necessarily have as a monk, so you can use normal weapons, you're just not predisposed to. And then on top of that, I chose Way of the Elemental for the monk, because she has that wristband thing, and I was really struggling on how to recreate that, especially as we see it have multiple different abilities. And so I figured that, especially with flavoring with the DM, you could have a conversation whereby you can shoot out different versions of the elemental abilities that a monk has, or you could go a different direction with it and perhaps ask the DM if you can have that classify as a blow dart weapon and then use the return feature from the artificer, which would act as it sort of recharging, as that weapon has to do in the movies. I chose the Acolyte background because I figured that, especially with the Black Widow movie, slight spoilers, but she grew up in the Soviet Union as part of a secretive organization that indoctrinates people. That's very culty. That's as we've seen in decades after the Soviet Union's collapse, it was almost a state religion at that point, worship of the leader, so it very much fits with that background. And then the other thing that really got me there is, as previously mentioned, Artificer is one of the only class that can create their own firearms in D&D right now, and I really hope it stays that way, but again, fits the character because she always seems to be able to find a weapon. It's a bit like what we said about Harley Quinn, where it's just, if there's a weapon around, she can use it, just as you said with the Chitauri weapon as well. And yeah, so that's what I've got for her. Any questions?
What race would you do for this character?
Oh yes, I went with the Githar Zanki, I think, the melee-based ones. And again, you can go into a lot of detail with this if you're going on a hardcore Marvel thing, whereby the split Gith could represent different parts of the Red Room and such, because we see scientists versus the foot soldiers that are the widows. And so that's very much reflected here in that the Githzerai aren't very bulky, but they're very strong, and they have this, and they're strong more because they know how to move their weight than they are because they have the weight in the first place.
So the Githyanki are the ones who are interstellar pirates. The Githzerai are the ones who are monk. Which one were you going for?
The Githzerai.
Githzerai, got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and actually that makes a lot of sense with some of her interactions with the other characters, because you never see her looking all that scared or looking like she's losing control. And it was it was an interesting, in the original Avengers movie, it was an interesting dichotomy between her and Hawkeye, because Hawkeye does get caught by Loki's scepter weapon.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about it for the moment, but the other thing about the monk is the aesthetic lifestyle, because that's the other thing we see with Widow is she's just constantly okay and able to crack jokes, and while everyone in the MCU cracks jokes, she's able to crack jokes no matter where she is, no matter what conditions she's under, whereas, say, the Prince of Wakanda, whose name I'm forgetting, just doesn't quip once while he's under stress. And so it very much represents that with the aesthetic lifestyle, is like, they can be under the worst conditions and be fine because they never had that much to begin with.
That's an interesting take on that, as opposed to sort of an austere, I have no possessions and I want no possessions and I have no sense of humor that I'm aware of, to have a character who, nope, everything's just fine, I'm cool, I'm good. And it also fits with, we don't really see her having any kind of love life except in Avengers Age of Ultron. And like everything else about Avengers Age of Ultron, the attempt to have her have a love life was pretty terrible. It was a pretty solid fail.
Yeah. Yeah, that was not a good idea on their part, but yeah. So that's what we got for today.
Yes, and we thank you so much for watching. And now, there's been a pretty dramatic shift in the D&D multiverse, which is that Wizards, on their noble and epic crusade to find more money, has decided to incorporate the Magic the Gathering multiverse into the D&D multiverse. So next up, we're going to have a beginner's guide for Dungeons & Dragons players into the D&D multiverse. As always, we thank you for watching, and we're going to look forward to seeing you on the next one.